Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to all of my audience. This is another episode of New Ways of Being. And with me today, I have a guest that I'm very excited to talk to. He's doing some very interesting things on top of a pretty interesting background that he has. And his name is Grant Storry. He has done many things, and I'm not even going to spell it out for you. I'm going to let him tell you about himself. I know he has a technology background, and at least parts of that were at an executive level, and he's still interested in that world, but he has gotten interested in consciousness and um, how the world needs to shift as a part of that. And so I've focused very much on consciousness. He may actually uh, paint into the picture a little bit more of a spectrum of what needs to change in the world when we talk about we can change the world. But the summary of the topic today is how we can change the world by raising our consciousness. So, Grant, welcome. It's so good to have you here with me today. Uh, please tell the audience something about yourself.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Ray. It's a pleasure to be here. And hello, everyone. Yeah, just a quick background. As Ray alluded to, I come from a technology background, and I spent most of my career building and leading technology companies, primarily in the digital commerce space, but also fintech and a variety of other industries. So I come from a pretty pragmatic and systems orientated world to begin with. And then over time, I'm in midlife now, but over time, I've found myself increasingly interested in in a deeper question and deeper questions around my own nature of being, my own, meditation and consciousness journey. But how it related to my business was like not only in just how we build systems or companies, but what kind of worldview or lens or way of relating gets encoded into them, either explicitly when we design them in a certain way, or implicitly based on how the way we see the world just as a default for the decisions we make when we're, writing a line of code or making a design decision within a product. And so that curiosity led me into my current work, which is at the intersection of technology. So I still have a number of technology businesses that I operate and some startup projects I'm advising. So yeah, the intersection of technology, systems thinking, and human development, and including co-founding an augmented intelligence platform designed to support a more regenerative way of thinking and working for folks and practitioners that are in that space. And then more recently, I've been collaborating very closely with cosmologist Dr. Jude Curvan, who I understand was on your show previously.
Mhm.
And what we're calling that collaboration is the science of unit of love, or SOUL for short. And just really quickly, at its core, SOUL is an attempt to bring together insights from science. Jude has a long background in physics and unit of science, philosophy, and lived experience, primarily to explore a simple but profound idea that reality is fundamentally relational, and that what we experience as love, which humans experience as love, may actually be a primary organizing principle shaping how systems and even our reality itself unfolds. So for me, this isn't just theoretical, it's become a very practical lens for how I lead, how I relate to others, and how I think about the future we're collectively creating.
Well, thank you. That's great and a very broad and interesting background. And I love the fact that you came to a point where you really began to look at the inner aspects of self and life. And as in a way, as I did, I went through something similar. But yeah, we do have Jude Curran in common. I love the work that she's done and that she's doing. She's just doing incredible things. And so she actually was the one who recommended that I reach out to you.
Oh,
And so
nice.
that's
Wonderful.
that's how I found out about you. And she thought that you might fit into uh, this book project, and that the conversation that we can have is one that can be of value to the listeners and the readers of the book. So I'm so
Mhm.
glad you're here, and I love what you've described. I'm really excited to explore into this because I of the people that I've interviewed, uh, many of them, probably even most of them, have had long backgrounds in spirituality or consciousness or mindfulness, um, and 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 some were quantum physicists who reached a point in their life where they started doing the inner work, and that led them to other things as well. So this should be fun. So let's begin with um, let's back up just a bit and come at this from and this is a little bit different than I normally do, but come from your perspective that you mentioned of wanting to really look more deeply into what was happening in your own life and what you saw out there in the world. And yeah, give me a bit more about that perspective that you realized and what you learned in in the process of exploring that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, I think spirit or spirituality has always been part of part of my life. I was raised in a spiritual household, so familiar with the language or that being a part of life. But that said, there was an uneasy feeling for me as a youth where I would say that I was a seeker or seeking, like always, wanting to explore and see if I got the right thing or if I was missing something or, what have you. And so, as is apt to do, I think for many people, that seeking ebbed and flowed as I grew up. So teenage years and early career and all that kind of stuff,
Right,
or that phase. Like sometimes it was more at the forefront, and then other times it was
right,
something that I returned to after a while. And I would say that when things started to really shift for me was probably in my mid 30s, and I was having some real challenging kind of crucible situations with a company that I was involved in. That was it was successful, but as you may relate, that sometimes there can be a crunch period in the company or what have you, trying to
yeah,
make payroll or finding investment or what have you, and so there's a real crunch period, and I would say that that was probably one of the low points from a career perspective for me, to the point where I was pretty close to having a breakdown, and definitely feeling burnout from just the grind of
yeah.
the fast pace of the technology industry,
I can relate.
and and so right around that time, one of the companies I was involved with was a mobile design agency that built mobile products
Mm,
for a variety of different brands. And one of the companies or people that we started working with was a very well known um, meditation teacher. And so we were building the app, and as I was testing it, I was starting to listen to there was a an introductory course as part of the app's offering, and I just sort of got really into it. And yeah, like I said, I was kind of like just testing it, and then all of a sudden it became a very personal, application for me. And um, I had done meditation before, but really, struggled with it. And this approach was more of an effortless or a letting go style, direct approach, and it. For whatever reason, really worked for me. Just the cues that were introduced, and it's really the first time I really felt like a shift, an awakening, and And then, long story short, found out that he was conducting a retreat in Costa Rica the next year, and so signed up for that and got to participate in person, and then really got um, some profound experiences working directly with him in the community, and then uh, really yeah, just really had an amazing experience. And so the methodology was, the direct approach, the Dzogchen Mahamudra bond tradition. And since then, I've just been reading a lot about that, and really, just enjoying it, and really feeling like less seeker and more kind of found this thing. And it's just something that I can, rest into, marinate with, and just expand from there. But really feel a sense of ease now, whereas before it was really kind of an urgent seeking.
That's something that in just recent times, like in the past year or two, uh, I've been hearing more and more the comment, there comes, there are many, many spiritual people who are uh, seekers, for decades and still are, and don't consider themselves beyond that. And but more people are saying it's time to realize you're awake. You can bring seeking to an end and start working on being.
Mm,
And
mhm,
in some ways, uh, some people also talk about, it's time to stop trying to fix ourselves all the time and make that shift into s- silence and into the state that works for you, um,
mhm.
an awakened state of whatever level that is. So um, lots of things have been happening, and I love what you've been describing. Now, you said that you um, began to look beyond that to how the world might need to change and how you could participate in that in other ways rather than just your uh, you know this technology business and then the next technology business. So yeah, add a little bit more. Tell us a bit about what you have learned about that and where it's taking you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Ray. Yeah, so I think many folks who are listening, who may have similar experiences, whether through meditation or other doorways into what I would say a more connected sense of capital S self, or the ground of being, can probably relate to this. But um, for myself, as I spent more time there and really marinated in an awakened state, uh, I noticed shifts in my own internal physiology. Like I would become um, more at peace, while I was, on the cushion, so to speak, and really formally practicing. But then also just in my day to day, I would be able to more quickly notice when I wasn't, when I was drifting a little bit, or catch a reaction rather than just get into a reactive mode, but notice an emotion or a reaction arising, and then being able to have that brief pause in that space to decide how to handle it or to interpret it. And so yeah, it really enriched and gave me a lens through which to sort of process and enjoy my own experience, but then also how I was relating to others, and then also the world around me. And then from that space and from that place, started to recognize how really, as a lot of wisdom traditions talk about, things, when you're seeing them from that place, you can really quickly see how things are really interconnected and interrelated. And so I was having a really felt sense of that, and feeling really connected, while I was practicing and then just off the cushion, like I say. And then I would go into these, whether it was a business meeting or a boardroom or a product design, discussion or what have you, and just notice how separate and disconnected both the language and the way that we've structured our interactions in air quotes professional environments or even our companies, how we've structured our companies or think about our companies or more and more broadly the economy, is very, separate and fragmented. And the more I noticed that, the more I realized there was this deep disconnect between what I was experiencing and felt as real and as reality, and then what was presented to me from society or mainstream on how things should be. And so that started to knot me as a really interesting, potential problem to solve or thing to lean into. And so I started asking the question, what would it look like if we started to redesign a business or a process or an investment or what have you, with the lens of interconnectedness at the forefront rather than this lens of separation and fragmentation. And I think that there's a lot to explore there, but that's really kind of the journey and where I found myself over the last few years.
Yes, that's great. And you've said a lot of things that um, I think are important things, and we could spend time taking that down several different paths. Um, but that last point there about fragmentation, I think, is a key point about the nature of the world and the nature of humanity. And every one of us have been brought up in a world that programs us to see the separateness and the fragmentation and not the interconnection or the wholeness. And it's been my conclusion in what I've done in my podcasts, just exploring how we can be in different ways. That that's the root cause of a whole lot of problems that we have in the world. And so I talk about needing to shift from the consciousness of separation or fragmentation to unity or love, or we can express it in many different ways. But so you know it's reassuring that you're pointing out the same kind of issues that you see in the world that I see, and worldview. I don't think you use that word, but you worldview. How
Hmm.
we view ourselves within the world is a big part of that as well. And again, it's one of separation. It's one of uh, limitation. You know, I as a person, how could I ever have enough power to change anything in the world, for example? And so we have a certain view of ourselves that can be very limiting. And and in coming to see ourselves and see the nature of reality or the universe differently, many people tap into different aspects of that, but we can discover that we are more powerful beings than we maybe realized, and that maybe we have been taking a victimhood point of view in the world, and maybe that needs to shift and so on. So I talk about it in terms of consciousness.
Hmm.
Other people talk about it in terms of um, other things, but you're coming to the same perspective. And so have you, from what you've learned, does that set you on a course of taking action that changes? Your goal is to change something in the world,
Yeah, and I fully agree with you, Ray. So I think we're like kind of pointing at the same thing, and it's also tricky, I think, because language itself,
right?
is limiting, and but yeah, like whatever we label it, it's my personal belief that there is like an inherent wholeness and unity to our reality. And I think, you know, the headset um of our five senses, if you will, as humans, is designed to pick up very specific things in our environment and keep our biological body, safe from harm. But, whether we talk about like the radio frequencies or what have you, there's a lot of things that are going on in our environment that we can't perceive, but it doesn't mean they're not there. And so, similarly, I think, we see this physical world and things appear to be, solids or separate, or there's space between them. And perhaps it's just that, maybe there's a lot more connection between those things than we appreciate, and our hardware or our headset of our five senses just isn't picking it up. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that I've found, anyways, in my personal meditation and spirituality practice, is it really allows me to really safely and lovingly, unhook from that headset and just rest in this interconnected field that I can really sense. And I think the more that one takes the time to explore that, the easier it is to actually own the sense of that field and the sense of that interconnectedness. And yeah, I think that that's a beautiful thing, that, like I say, has really served me well when I might have been reactive in a situation in the past, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can really feel that now, and take some time to process it, or maybe handle something in a more loving or a just way than reactive. And yeah, so I'm right alongside you with what you were talking about.
Yes, that's great. I, you know, I you said something there, and I don't think you used the word wholeness, but you were describing wholeness.
Hmm.
And we can call it interconnectedness, and we can call it the field. You
Hmm.
used that word several times, and more people are using the field, kind of springing off of the idea of a quantum field, or a unified field that is there. We know the physicists know it's there because of their experiments. Otherwise, we don't have a physical sense of it. We can't see it. We can't feel it necessarily. But knowing that there is a field that uh, surrounds and holds everything, everything, in fact, is a part of that field, whatever we choose to call it. More and more, I call it the field of consciousness or the field of awareness. But
Hmm.
in many ways, it's much bigger than that. So there are many words that could be used. But yeah, to have a sense of the field, but you're touching on something that I think is really important, and that is to shift from this fragmented view of the world to have more of a sense of wholeness to the world, and to the universe, and to how we fit into that. I think wholeness is something that's very, very important, and it's something that's not necessarily easy to talk about, or to tell people, oh, you need to have a more holistic view, um, because most people wouldn't know what to do with that. How do I shift from fragmentation to wholeness? What are some of the lessons you've learned about that?
Hmm. Yeah. I don't know about lessons, but I think one thing I appreciate is, I think it's almost impossible for the rational mind to make that leap. I think, intellectually, the scientific method itself actually is a reductionist method. So it's actually predicated on seeing the world a certain way, and that you can reduce it to these discrete parts, because that's how you build and design experiments. And and what we're describing, or what you're talking about with wholeness, and what I've mentioned with the field, which is, the same thing, is really it requires a different mode or a sense or way of knowing. And so one thing, in terms of a method that you're asking about is to actually unhook from that machinery of thought and that rational mind, and just allow my awareness to rest in my heart center. And I think, I don't know if you've explored Heart Math Institute on this
Yes.
podcast before in your own writings, but like, they're doing some amazing research there on HRV and the heart field, and actually how there's more activity going on in a heart center than a brain. And so I think the heart actually, and the heart center, potentially has more modes or ways of knowing, or a broader spectrum to pick up on the nature of reality than potentially the rational thought-based brain. And so that's one method that I've used, is first and foremost trusting, because it does take a bit of a leap of faith to shift into that mode of letting go of your ego mind, and really allowing your awareness to rest in this broader spectrum, grounded being in your heart center. And so I think that was probably the biggest thing for me to get over, was really like the leap of faith that it actually takes, which, I think some folks describe as like the dark night of the soul, or what have you, when you do have an awakening, because it is kind of an ego death. It's a way of knowing where you're really fixated in your rational mind, and you need to let that go as like the only way or the only point of view, and then appreciate that there are multiple points of view through which you can experience reality.
Yes. Very good. I like what you brought up there. And quite a long time ago, I talked about some of the heart-mind interrelationships that have been discovered, and I haven't done a program specifically about that, but there's so much going on in the world related to that. Heart Math Institute has really been doing a lot to teach uh, as many people as they can reach about what they've learned, and they're doing just fantastic work. And in the last even the last 6 months, I've been much more involved in um, events that have been going on that focus on heart heart mind coherence, and not
Nice.
just for you yourself, but also global coherence. So I don't know if you've had a chance to participate in that, but yeah, I've gotten back to it was many years ago. I think it was 2018 when I first started doing uh, those kind of exercises and self coherence, and since then all this has grown in focusing on global coherence, and so in recent weeks I've been even doing that again, and
Nice.
and it's very powerful way, and it does bring us to a point of reference. I think that's important to talk about is coherence. Now,
Mhm.
yeah, before we got going here in the conversation, you mentioned that word to me, and tell me your point of view on coherence.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll unpack a few things. So I think I might have mentioned the science of unitive love as well, and we talked a little bit about uh, Jude at the beginning. So through my travels in this world of exploring, my own consciousness and my own meditation practices, and what is the nature of reality, and starting to experience a different lens on reality, the more I kind of explored my own inner world and consciousness. Really, through all that, really discovered Jude's work in a more profound way. And she uh, talks a lot about the unit of science, and really demonstrates with rigorous, evidence-based science, how actually our reality is both constructed, and how it's interconnected and related. And so, as I was trying to learn her concepts, I'm not a an academic by trade, and so some of them are pretty uh, tricky to get my head wrapped around. So how I do that is I, kind of teach myself. They say that like to become an expert, you should be able to, or the best way to become an expert is to teach someone else the topic. So I started trying to teach myself and creating a PowerPoint presentation as if I was giving a lecture on it. And Jude's so gracious. Like I actually sent it to her and was like, "Hey, am I close?" And she's like, "Well, here and here, but yeah, you gotta work on this or what have you."
Yeah.
And anyways, through all of that, we wound up starting to collaborate on the science of unit of love, which takes unit of science, everything that she's been working on, and really links it intimately with human experience, the experience of love in our nervous systems. And so it really links the inner and the outer, from the she's a cosmologist. So from the cosmology of the universe and how the universe is constructed with unit of relational, equations and theory there,
Right.
straight through to how we can experience this inside very intimately. And so within the science of unit of love, one thing that is foundational to that is that everything exists in relationship, like, right down to the smallest atom, right up to you and me, relating as two humans, and even through, Zoom and the internet. Everything is in relationship. There's all these relationships that are occurring constantly. And they're informational in nature. So, your headset of your five senses are picking up on a certain band of information, and you can see certain attributes of like my oh, I don't have any hair, but eyebrow color, eye color, perhaps. And then you're also subconsciously picking up on a bunch of information that your nervous system is translating without you even being aware of it. And so there's all this information that's getting passed back and forth in relationship between you and I, and then everything that we're also in relationship with as individuals in our current in our separate environments as well. Where you're in, I think, Colorado. I'm in British Columbia in Canada, and then what's interesting that we found is coherence comes in as a measure of the quality of those relationships. So reality unfolds in relationship through time, through space time. And it'll keep doing that. That's like the evolutionary impulse of the universe. That's just, that's kind of the directionality of time is that. And as time ticks on and unfolds, the next slice of time appears, and and everything that has the probability of manifesting right at that moment manifests in relationship at that time. So that occurs kind of as a a momentum or a force, regardless. But what the science of unit of love kind of presents is a lens through which to appreciate that occurring, and then say, you know what, if this is going to occur anyways, how do we infuse that next moment with that heartfelt ground of being love, so that the relationship that gets fused and manifest in that next moment is the most regenerative or generative that it could possibly be. And so the more that we are in tune with that loving, ground of being and wholeness, and that lens of wholeness that you talked about, the more regenerative the outcome will because that'll be a higher coherence relationship. Um, Time will tick on. And for example, if you were in a relationship with somebody and you approached it from a very negatively charged emotional state, so, not the opposite of love, but say hate or anger, the relationship will still manifest in the flow of time, space time, but the relationship between the two entities will be degenerative or not as high quality or incoherent. And then there will be degenerative outcomes from that. And you can see this in family systems, right? Like if a child is brought up in a loving and nurturing relationship or with their parents, then as those relationships unfold through time, they're likely going to be very well adjusted and grounded adults. versus if they are in a household that has a lot of anger and negativity, they can still potentially get there, but it's a lot harder, and it'll be from a place of dysregulation and incoherence. So that's sort of how coherence plays into the science of unitive love. It's a measure of the quality of the relationship within unitive science as reality unfolds.
Wow. You packed a lot of information into that explanation. So I love it. Thank you. That you did a great job. That really describes it very well. And sometimes coherence, talking about it, focuses too much on the harmonic side, and and you really painted it in terms of kind of real world relationships. I think that's very important. Yes, I love that.
Mhm.
And so coherence is something that we're hearing more of. People are emphasizing that we need to seek greater coherence in the world and in everything we do, beginning individually. And that helps really. I love the way you described that. It really helps get a handle on it, a measure of the quality of the relationship.
Mm.
Yes. Um, so that, going from there, the, maybe that was a summary of the science of unitive love. Uh, but I know I had seen on the Worldview um, website, that you had written some things about it, or you or Jude wrote about it and described it. So I've been very curious as to how that was unfolding and where it was going. And will we see some courses on science of unitive love?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Ray. So yeah, as I kind of mentioned in my last response there, it started with me kind of just trying to get my head wrapped around unit of science in general and Jude's cosmology, and then we through that started a working relationship with her and produced that initial paper, The Science of Unit of Love. And then from there, it's been fascinating because we've shared that within our circles and some of our networks, and it's really resonating with folks across disciplines. We have business
Yes.
people that are starting to appreciate that. Oh, we can actually measure the coherence of a team, and if we actually pay attention to this and look for ways um, to measure it and I hate to use the word optimize, but like nurture a greater coherence amongst the team members, all of a sudden we're getting higher retention rates, better productivity, and people aren't burning out as much, and all these kind of really interesting pragmatic applications. We've had a psychologist who's working very closely with us because is science of unit of love and coherence specifically relates directly to their clinical work, such that they're actually readjusting their some of the in-flight studies they had to incorporate the concept of coherence and the science of unit of love into these clinical
Wow.
studies, so we can start to really demonstrate and get some really solid data on how the inner state of an individual and the coherence in relationship, within the relationship to yourself as it relates to self worth, actually dramatically changes the lens through which an individual sees themselves in the world, and reduces the likelihood of criminal intent and that kind of stuff. So lots of very interesting stuff in the world of psychology. And one of the things that we are really noticing is this concept of coherence and the science of unit of love, because it links the inner and the outer. It links the science with the wisdom traditions. It really becomes this operator, or this translating unit that can start to translate the language across all of these different domains, whether that's philosophy, psychology, cosmology, physics, etc. And so you can start to really use this same unit of measure across all of these different, yeah, like I say, domains. And with coherence being that measure, and we use the capital C coherence, which means, you know, a message can be coherent, but it can be degenerative. Capital C coherence is, the message is coherent, but and also it is in resonant alignment with love, like within, a positive outcome. And we're finding that that measure of coherence can start to get that feeling that we experience as love or interconnectedness kind of off the page and into systems. And so that's where we're at right now, to answer your question on starting to explore how we can apply this framing and this lens to healing systems that are in dis-ease. So whether that is family systems or community systems or national systems,
Our world.
that's the world exactly. We're working on it. So that's where we're at now. We've recently formed a not-for-profit society, the Coherent Society of Earth. We have a growing number of folks that are working with us across domains to start to apply the science of unit of love to their specific domain. So that's yeah, it's starting to snowball. It's beautiful to see.
Wow. I love it. I love everything you just said there. Coherent Society of Earth.
Yeah.
Um, you know, y- we've covered some interesting ground so far, and you triggered some thoughts there. You early on in the conversation, you talked about the fact that you saw, um, you know, issues in the world that just aren't aren't right. That need to change, and and we said that those are based in fragmentation, and you even used the example of in a business context. My whole career was in corporate work situations, and when you're in corporate for a long time, you see all kinds of problems, all kinds of conflicts that either are right there in front of you or under the covers and are still a big problem, etc. And so I think greater awareness, anything that helps begin to shift, and it shouldn't be just spiritual seekers. The whole
Mhm.
world will benefit as we shift our consciousness to greater wholeness, a greater understanding of coherence, a greater understanding of love. And we could probably dig into that a little bit more because, I have a very strong sense, and you didn't bring it up, so I don't know if you've gone there yet, but love is, as I've begun to understand this new unified physics and how wholeness is absolute kingpin to the whole thing, to understand that everything is evolving in wholeness. It holds itself together. It seeks to every system or subsystem, uh, in the universe as it's evolving. It seeks to uh, ensure its own integrity and to grow and evolve. And that fits within a larger picture of the whole. And we could talk about it at 1,000 different levels, but um, so love, I view, and I have for a long time, but I'm beginning to maybe begin to put it into some different words. I've For a long time I've seen love as what is the force that holds the universe together, and
Mhm.
and it's the force that holds relationships together. So the love aspect um, has a lot of power within it that I don't think you quite touched on, and you've probably explored it in your research, but um, talk about that a little bit more.
Sure, I'd love to. And thanks for inviting the question. Um, you know, my view of it is, So, so if we back up a little bit, I think love is a tricky word for us, especially in the West, English speakers. We have one word for this emotion that can describe so many different things. And so that's a bit tricky. So I think just exploring and understanding and appreciating that there's different flavors of love. And when I'm speaking about the science of unit of love and love in that context, it's it's not sentimental love. It's you know in our nervous systems, I feel like the word that we describe and the feeling that we have of love is a resonance with capital C coherence. So I think if we start to rewild ourselves and start to really get our instincts back that sometimes in modern society have been very damaged or trampled upon, we start to appreciate and feel this pull in us when we sense something is capital C coherent, whether that's a person that we think, there's a bunch of information like I was talking about that gets exchanged that we may not even be conscious of, but we get pulled to certain people that we just have a feeling about, and that feeling is our nervous system picking up on the coherence of that relationship with that individual. And the capital C, like regenerative healthy coherence that we're talking about in the science of unit of love, means that that coherence is like likely a regenerative or generative connection. So when we're talking about love in that context, it's more our nervous system's ability to detect coherence in our relationship. Similarly, if we see a piece of art that we love, there's a coherence there that's being communicated non-verbally through the art. And that coherence we're experiencing as loving the art or loving a song. So there's this amazing, when you start to see the world as if, like when you start to appreciate this lens and see reality through this lens, that there is this field that connects everything, that everything is in relationship, that the quality of those relationships are how coherent they are, and that the feeling of love and connection towards a specific thing that appears as an other in through that field means that there's a high coherence there. You start to see how it all kind of fits together, or at least I do. So that's sort of how I think about love, how I think about relationship, how I think about coherence. And then this is kind of pure speculation on my part, but I feel like if and at the beginning of the conversation you were talking about consciousness, and I think I personally subscribe to a consciousness primary view of reality, that everything is appearing in consciousness. And if and through Jude's work on unit of science, which is evidence based, she demonstrates how the universe itself started in a big breath and has actually a lifespan and will end based on a lot of the equations and science that she talks about.
Mhm.
And so I feel as though that there's this state of consciousness that is pure love, that we would in our nervous systems feel as pure love. And the universe and times space time and our reality emerged through whether it's a big bang or a big breath, emerged into reality. And then as we meditate as individuals, we actually are kind of unhooking from physical and kind of like resting in that consciousness, which is this loving interconnectedness, which is kind of outside of space time. And through Jude's equations in unit of science, it's showing that uh, time progresses, relationships progress, and the universe is ultimately going to end in a few billion years. And at the end of that, well, it'll go back into this wholeness and this consciousness, which is um, which is felt as love. And so, what we're positing in the science of unit of love is like the evolutionary impulse of the universe is to simply individuate and experience itself from all of these different points of view. And its natural state is to ultimately return to wholeness or to love. And that's why it actually rewards us as conscious operators with free will whenever we choose to make an action in right relationship with how it wants to be, which is loving, which is why it rewards us with a regenerative outcome rather than a degenerative outcome whenever we infuse whatever relationships we can through free will with love, if if that makes any sense to you.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And it also demonstrates that this is a big subject, and
Yeah,
we can
exactly.
take it
We could
we
spend
can
a whole
take
podcast just on that, but yeah.
we can take it down many different paths. And you know, and this, but for me personally, I love what you said, and it emphasizes something that I've since I started this project to bring together viewpoints and information about how raising consciousness can change the world, and how we, and in fact, if we raise our consciousness, we by default change the world. And if we do it in coherent ways. So you've brought up a very good aspect here that I hadn't previously thought about or touched on, but um, it automatically pays off. It moves the world in the right direction. And so that's very good. And I see you said something else there that I was going to follow. Um, well, just, and you made me realize that I have thought about love for a very long time, mostly in terms of universal love, that that big love, that holistic love. And and that's also an issue in talking about it, because many people may not immediately connect, what's he talking about? How do I relate to it? And you keep coming back to how we relate to it in our bodies. And
Mm,
and I think that's very important. And in fact, I've really come to understand that the universe, there's an emphasis going on right now. Many spiritual thinkers uh, have generally believed, we want to get to this better place, to get to heaven, and where everything's perfect. And why would we want, if somebody brings up the idea of heaven on earth, you know, why why do I want heaven on earth? Earth has got, and the physical body has all these problems and limitations. But I really have begun to believe that the universe is evolving to that there is an advantage to being in physical form, and
mm,
of being a human being on earth. We can experience things through our body that purely non-physical beings cannot directly relate to. It
mhm.
requires physical senses. And so there's that importance there of tying back, as you've been doing, to uh, coherence, how we sense that through the nervous system.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more focus going on in a lot of conversations I participate in these days, or what I read, that comes back to the nervous system, and practicing the kind of breathing that supports the nervous system and the vagus nerve and so on. But this is a big subject. And um, you know, what what's happened for me is I went from a very technical, logical world, and then have been more into consciousness and the spiritual side, but to try to find the right language to talk about it, and especially people who, if I'm saying you need to raise your consciousness, well, why? They,
Mhm.
People don't immediately understand it. I mean, I can use various kinds of examples, but I love the way you're coming at it from coherence, and how that is the piece that kind of brings it all together in a way. I had not thought of it in that way before. I mean, I've understood coherence and the importance of it, but you've added some aspects here I think are really very important. So I love the work that you've been doing with Jude on the science of unity of love. Um, and we're running out of time. So,
Yeah, unfortunately. This has been a
yes,
lovely chat, though,
and I would love
Race.
to keep this going, but you've said many valuable things that needed to be shared. And so I thank you for being here and doing that. Are there any final thoughts that you have to leave with the audience before you leave?
Oh man, so many, and maybe we can have a follow-on conversation. But maybe I'll just leave with a comment on love, just because I think that that's a really misunderstood or maybe underappreciated word or emotion or a tricky one for us to sort of get our heads wrapped around, as you were alluding to, Ray, on universal love. So what if love is not the reward at the end of a system, but maybe the force that shapes it. So maybe let's just leave it at that. And I think unpacking that a little bit more, it's there's this dynamic interplay of coherence in every moment. And I think sometimes we reduce love to this sentiment and this thing that we maybe get when or if, or we give ourselves permission to, when all these things are met. And really what I've come to appreciate is like embodying it in the moment allows us to really shape a beautiful reality for ourselves.
I love it. Thank you, Grant. This has been Grant Storry here with us today and sharing so much wisdom about the science of unity of love. And again, I'd love to keep the conversation going, but let's stay in touch, Grant. And thank you for being here and sharing that wisdom. And for my audience, have a great day and a great life.